Hello, welcome back. Homemadespaceship here. And today we are going to talk about wavetable synthesis and what exactly that is, what to expect, how to use it, and what's unique about it, essentially. Um, and with regular synthesis, let's not say synthesis, let's say synthesizer, right? If we look at regular synthesizer, traditional synthesizers, like let's maybe take operator here, right? We kind of have these set wavetables to choose from, and or oscillators, let's call them. They're waves, right? So we have these waves to choose from. These are basic waves, and how these were originally invented was electrical current voltage, right? Either it's on or it's off. That's a square wave. If you look at that right there. A sine wave, is the purest form. It's just a simple, like perfectly even flow. We've got all sorts of different types of wave that we could run through. And when synthesizers were strictly, analog and voltage based, we only had a certain amount that we could sort of mess with or vary. And they were slightly different here and there. But with a wavetable synthesizer, that thing that we're spinning around, that oscillator, right? Which if we look at this, right, how oscillators generally work, here's our one cycle of an oscillator. As say we're at A440, 440 hertz, right? That means that this specific shape, maybe right here or whatever, is spinning around 440 times a second. That's how we get pitch, right? How many times it spins around a second is pitch. And that shape is what gives it its sound. It tells you the difference between a sine wave or a square wave or whatever we have, right? And once digital came around, we sort of were able to change things a little bit. And we got wavetable synthesizers. So instead of having these set waves, people often thought, well, why not have our own shape, make a custom cycle? Make whatever we want, right? Whatever little snippet of sound maybe, or whatever little cycle shape that we want, we can spin that around however many times we want to get our sound. So basically with wavetable synthesizers, what we have are customizable oscillators. And we could draw them. Some wavetable synths will allow you to just simply draw them. We can take them from a snippet of sound. So like if we look really close at this guy here, you can see that we sort of have these cycles in here. And we could maybe just take like this and spin this around, or maybe take this and spin this around, however many times to get whatever pitch we want. And that's going to give us our wavetable. That is our sound, and it's usually almost always completely custom. And this really dives deep into the power of wavetable synthesizers, which is going to be that we're going to get really unique sounds, like sounds that possibly no one's ever heard before, because it's just a unique shape and flow of what's going on here. Which is a really cool thing about this. So it allows us to have really unique sounds. This is where we're getting a lot of our growls and really unique pads and chords and stuff like that. Really organic, almost organic sounding, but not organic, right? Because we're very much emulating just air pressure cycle, natural air pressure cycles of whatever sound that we may or may not have. And so that's really what wavetable synthesizers are just really these custom oscillators here. If we look at Wavetable, our stock wavetable synthesizer with Ableton, we can see that we have two oscillators here. There's two that we can play with. Here's our basic shapes, right? And our very basic wavetables. Let me load up a fresh instance because I have some sounds made here for us. So as you can see, we can sort of scroll through all these different shapes here. These are basic shapes. If we go here, here's more and more sine waves kind of stacked on top of each other. There's the harmonic series. These cool sub here, different shapes. As you can see here, here's just a bunch of this would be 0 seconds, and this would be like 50 milliseconds, probably a very short amount of time, but it's a sound that evolves over a short amount of time. Wherever we park this wavetable selector right here is which moment in time that we're going to oscillate, which specific moment. So a lot of these wavetables are very simply like short bips of sound, but we're taking individual, like, you know, just a couple tiny little frames of it and using that as our cycle here. Really cool one right here. I really like. Cool. So there's basic ones. They give us a bunch of different. Here's some potential in that, right? They give us a bunch of different collections here that we can play with. And a bunch of different types, and here's our different types here. And we can drag this right here, or we can grab this guy. That's our wavetable. This is our volume. These are different views. Doesn't really matter. Doesn't change the sound at all. Just a different way of looking at it when you change it. A big important thing about looking at these wavetables, and this is kind of a good example right here, is that the simpler and smoother it is, the more similar to a sine wave it is, the more pure it's going to be. Now, I always say with sounds that, you know, if you start with something more pure, more simple, it gives it more room to evolve and grow via stuff like distortion, chorus, layering, lots of other things. The busier a sound is, the busier the wavetable is, the noisier it's going to be. Something I like to talk about is sort of like the science of sound, and that all sounds sort of exist on the spectrum of a sine wave being the purest tone. It is a pure one singular fundamental frequency, one singular frequency. And then on the other side of that spectrum is white noise, which is almost all frequencies. A sine wave is pure pitch, one singular tone, one singular pitch. That's why like they use it to test your hearing and stuff like that. No harmonic content and just a single pitch. White noise being no pitch, right? It has no note to it. It's all just harmonics, no fundamental frequency. So we have this here, and we have our wavetable synth. In our wavetable, the busier the wavetable looks, the noisier it's going to sound. Less sort of room to grow with distortion. And personally, I prefer the simpler sounds, and I like to grow them and evolve them with cool distortion, OTT, processing, crazy EQs, stuff like that, to give myself a cool, unique sound that's sort of grown and evolved. Cool, sweet. So there's our oscillators right there. There's our changers. There's a couple modulation things. So that's just, once again, we're just changing the shape of it. We're changing the shape of it. This is literally what's happening is now we're cycling this, right? And warp's cool. You can kind of simplify it, give it different sounds. Fold, here we go again. See, now we have more cycles. We're getting less pitch. And busier. Here's some pitch stuff over here. Modern mode. And then we have pulse width, which just changes the width of the pulse. Sync is going to sort of create more duplicate cycles, which will then raise sort of the apparent octave of it. It's not necessarily octave, but it's creating more cycles. Therefore, you have higher pitch. And then FM here. We can tune our FM oscillator. FM's really cool. A big drawback to Wavetable, unfortunately, is that you cannot FM oscillator 1 with oscillator 2. I really hope they change that. I really hope they allow that in the future. But Serum, Current, Vital, Phase Plant, all our other wavetable synthesizers will allow you to do that. The difference being with Wavetable versus those, that Wavetable comes free with Ableton, and those are all about $150 to $200, minus Vital, which is free. I think Current might have a free option too, but those free options generally come with almost very, very limited content, and essentially, you know, aren't going to be as good as Serum. I do think Serum is one of the best. We'll talk about that later. Cool. If we go through the rest of the wavetable functions really quick, we have a sub oscillator here. This is adding more harmonics to our sub. Got a nice sub in there. We have filters over here. Once again, a very limited amount of filters in Wavetable versus something like Serum or Current or Vital or Phase Plant or anything like that, which is a drawback. But once again, it's free. Our slope here, we have 2 filters, which is really cool. We can run them one after another. We can run them both going into both at the same time or running them next to each other. Or we could split them. Filter 1 is for oscillator 1 and filter 2 is for oscillator 2 is what split's going to mean. Cool. So we have our filters there. We have our amplitude envelope. This is our default amplitude envelope. We can assign the volume to envelope 2 for oscillator 2 if we want, but otherwise they're by default both attached to this amplitude. Envelopes 2 and 3 are just blank for you to assign. LFOs 1 and 2 are also just not naturally assigned. If you're not familiar with envelopes versus LFOs, when I press the key, an envelope will happen once. So let's maybe turn this guy on. Let's go to serial. We're going to use our mod matrix here to assign stuff in Wavetable. So essentially, when I click on something like filter frequency, you can see it shows up. And I'm going to assign this to envelope 2. Cool. Let's see if I click resonance, you'll see now resonance shows up, and I could also sort of assign that. An envelope's going to happen once when I press that key. Right? And it's based off attack, which is our first phase. Decay, which is our second phase. Sustain is where that parameter will sit while we're holding our finger on the key or sustaining pressure on the key. And release is what's going to happen once we let go. So you might not hear release. That's probably because you don't have release on your sound. So make sure that your amplitude envelope has release to hear the releases on the additional modulating envelopes. Cool, envelopes 2 and 3. Now, if we go back here, I'm going to take these off, and then let's go to an LFO. And an LFO is something that is going to keep moving when I press my finger down on that key. We have a rate, a depth, and a shape here that is going to just continuously happen. So envelopes happen once when you press the key. It does that one shape once. LFOs are going to continue to happen while we hold our finger down on that key to a rate in the shape that we designate. Cool. Sweet. So moving on, we've got our MIDI options too here, which is kind of basic synthesizer stuff, but really quick. Something like velocity, right? So how hard we press the key with our MIDI keyboard, or the velocity designated in the MIDI clip, which would be right here, right? That's going to affect maybe the filter cutoff or the LFO rate or whatever we want. Key tracking is usually generally higher note means, like, let's say, for example, higher LFO rate. A lower note would be a lower LFO rate. Very popular with like drum and bass resynths, type thing. Pardon my vocalization. Pitch bend wheel, we can set the pitch bend wheel and the mod wheel to do whatever we want through this MIDI matrix as well. Pressure is or aftertouch is only supported on certain keyboards. You can see if your MIDI keyboard is supporting that. It's essentially you can control sort of like a velocity thing while pressing down on the keys. And then there's a random right here. MPE also is a whole nother nutshell, which I'm not really going to get into, but it's a new multi-polyphonic expression, which means something like slide or pressure on polyphonic or MPE keyboards, like a Rolly C board or something like that. You can kind of slide your fingers up, or the push 3 is a great example of an MPE instrument. We can change the pressure, like just and the sliding around the pad, stuff like that. It's going to give us a lot more expression, a lot more lifelike feeling in our stuff. Cool. We've got our volume here. Mono, one voice at a time, one note at a time. Now we get glide. So when I overwrite that other note or I play another note, we're getting that. Cool. Or polyphony allows us to play multiple notes at once. And here's how many. Glide is how long it takes to slide to the next note. Unison, there's a couple cool unison modes. Classic just detunes it. Another thing that stinks about Wavetable is sort of that you can't assign detuning or unison per oscillator. It's to both. Shimmer is going to give us, generally you see a shimmer reverb. It means there's a high or octave up generally. Adding noise to the sound. Phase sync is another really cool option here. It sort of syncs those detunes together. More of a stereo position spread using unison to create stereo width. And then we've got this sort of random note, which kind of randomizes our feeling of detuning. Cool, sweet. So you got those to mess with. That is basically Wavetable in a nutshell. So we have our set wavetables to choose from. Another cool thing we can do is just throw in our own wavetable. So something I like to do is maybe take like a vocal. So let's maybe take like a small chunk of this. So if we just threw this whole sample in here, it would be a lot, right? For Wavetable to cycle 440 times a second, right? So when we are doing our wavetable synthesis, something I highly recommend is to find a spot sort of like this. And we're going to just take that. So I just hit Command B, and that's going to render that out right there for me. Now it's just as easy as just dragging and dropping right there. And now we've got... All right, let's try maybe taking a bit longer of a section. Sure, let's do maybe this. Cool, Command B. And let's see how long this looks right here now. Cool, and that's really cool. I like that. I feel like I'm getting a very, I'm very inspired to make sort of chords out of this. I believe I wrote some MIDI down here. I'm just going to go snag that. And let's hear how this sounds on here. Let's see if we can work with this with our custom oscillator here. Sweet. Give it a fair shake with some reverb. So getting like a very cool organic sort of like reed organ-y kind of sound after that. It's got a little bit of a choir vibe to it because it's a voice. So we get a lot of organic harmonic content here to play with Wavetable, which is really, really cool. Like I said, I always recommend giving it a fair shake with a little bit of effects. Effects processing is going to be huge on this because Wavetable does not come with any built-in effects like Serum does or Faceplant or whatever. So make sure you give your sound a fair shake, whether it's reverb, delay, OTT, saturation, distortion, all that kind of stuff. Make sure you're giving it a little bit of love, a little bit of seasoning. You know, you're not just going to throw a chicken breast on the grill and expect it to taste good. We need to put a little bit of sauce or seasoning on it too, and that's sort of our effects here. And modulation is too. You know, just a stale sound almost is never going to sound good. Let's make it move a little bit. Let's mess with this. Here we could even do this really quick, right? Oscillator one position. Oh, I'm getting a lot of cool sound out of this. So one of my favorite things to do in designing sounds like this too is to layer with those organics or those more analog synth sounds, those more basic shapes, let's say, right? And then now you get both those basic shapes with those other sounds in there, which is starting to sound pretty good there. Cool. Yep. You want to think about guitars too. Like think about a guitar or voice or something, how much natural modulation, whether it's vibrato, how hard you hit the string, if you're using a finger or using a pick, what your amp is like, you know, all those things are going to affect this sort of sound naturally, which happens when we play a natural instrument. So we have to really give that kind of love to our designed sounds, to make sure that there's, you know, maybe this type of modulation happening on something and then a more broad modulation happening on something, different LFOs, different envelopes. Just give it a lot of subtle love. You know, a few defining characteristics. Is it plucked? Is it rolling in? And then a lot of subtle love is really going to bring those sounds to life and make them usable. Cool. So I made a couple sounds here for us to dive into. Like I said, this is a lot about processing here. So like I have a fat rack that I use all the time for heavier sounds and stuff like that. And I'm going to throw that on right away. You know, without it, it's not going to sound that good. So what do I have going on here? So cool. This one needs to come up. That can get deleted. 3. That's not good. So I got something pretty cool here. Let's take off all this processing. So here's one of my favorite weird things. A bunch of EQ3s. Makes it gooey. Don't ask how that works. EQ3 is broken. Haha. Without my fat rack here. Get to move. Sweet. Cool. So as you can see, I've just got a basic shape here, and I've got this wavetable I'm playing with to give it a little bit more organicness. I got this guy moving here, this notch filter. We can switch the filter up. Cool. Sweet. So, yep, a little bit more of organic sound coming in there, and just crushing it with some effects. I also made this guy. Here's something kind of with basic shapes and a little bit of love. So I'm just really simply modulating the gain. I've got 2 basic shapes. They're fun to... You can't do that with a regular sort of, synth is to be able to scroll through these sounds and stuff. So we can even go ahead and sort of really quickly experiment with different sounds here. Always being not sort of sure what we're going to get, which is really nice. And that's part of it. A big thing of sound design is sort of setting yourself up for success and then just twisting knobs and messing with things and playing with things until something sounds good. You're going to learn everything about synthesis. You're going to learn everything about how these things work. And then once you do that, you're going to go right back to just twisting random knobs and hoping it sounds good. I always sort of kind of say dress for success. So if I'm making a bass sound, like I said, I'm going to throw saturator, OTT, roar, something like that on there to make sure it's beefed up while I'm sound designing. And like if it's a lead or something like that, I'm going to make sure it has reverb, delay, maybe like some compression on it to keep it up front, and other things like that. If you don't sort of dress for success, it's probably not going to work out. So another thing in that realm too, a really important point here, is when you're sound designing, don't just like kind of free range sound design. I don't like doing this, at least. Just out with no context, right? So when I sound design, I make a cool drum beat first. Right? I also make sure that I have my sidechain set up already too when I'm sound designing. So I'd save a sound design template too. So save as template. So when you're sound designing, it has context. And I even have like a little vocal bed back here in E. Shout out Effin. Just to make it sound better so the sounds have a chance to sound good. That's really, really important. Cool. Let's maybe go with like a formant sound. You never know it's going to sound good. It's a couple basic shapes, a little bit of modulation there. Here's a fun one. So what's happened here is... So I've got, once again, basic shapes, and I've got these different oscillators giving it its flavor. And all that stuff there for basses. But what I really like about this, and let me just, I'm actually going to delete that MIDI for now, is I've taken all my fun knobs and I've macroed them. And once I've macroed them, I sort of found the range by moving it around in which it sounded good, and I set that range in the map setting. So now what you can do here is sort of create a randomizer with these macros, which is really cool and something really fun to do with Wavetable here. So if I... So then I could just hit save here. And now I'm just hitting random until I get good sounds. And so I really love doing that, creating a sort of generator rack here, which is a lot easier than you would think. Just find the knobs that sound good to twist when you're twisting them and save those. Cool. So, yeah. Other things I've done here too. I made a more housey sound here. I've split the filters, so I have my formant. So add that formant sound over the top, gives it a much more unique organic sound here. I've also split that to be on a bandpass here, and while the more basic shape is on that low pass filter. We got roar here doing work. I love roar. I love adding erosion to the top end of my drop sounds. That little added noise makes it take up a lot more space and seem a lot bigger. If we could look at the houseier context here. Cool, some more organic-y textures on top of that from Wavetable. The other thing I was going to show you guys too is again those nice organic chords there. If we look at this ARP, this is an owl sound that I put in here. It had good sine wave features to it, so. So let's play this with this. Cool, and just a really great way to create organic textures. Now, if you want to talk about the difference between Wavetable and Serum and the other Wavetable synthesizers out there, is that Wavetable is free. It comes with Ableton. And it's a great way to kind of mess around and have fun. I like using Wavetable when I feel like using something new, because when I use something that I'm not quite ultra familiar with or I use all the time, like Serum, a lot of cool things will precipitate from that. Cool things precipitate from the unknown. And I think that's really important. Serum, I think, is the best option. Why is Serum the best option? Because it is the most supported with the most presets and the most things going on. It just has so many presets you can download, so many built-in presets that are good. It has 3 oscillators now. It has multiple effects you can run. All those effects within Serum then can now be really easily controlled by all the other envelopes and things in Serum, which makes it really, really awesome. The way I learned sound design was downloading presets and taking them apart bit by bit. Serum just has the most presets out there. So if you get Serum, download presets you like and reverse engineer them and learn their tricks, learn what their standards are, learn what every bass sound has, every lead sound has, and then learn what the cool trick to that sound is, and break it down that way. Serum, I think, is the best just because it's so widely supported. Serum 2 is now awesome. Current is also amazing. Current is much more centered towards bass music producers, I feel, with a tone cloud, which is awesome. It has a whole cloud of tones you can pick from that people upload, and they're constantly feeding you new presets with Current. Vital is good. People like Vital. I was never a fan. I found it to be a little clicky, a little weird, and I just preferred Serum. Phase Plant also sort of has the highest learning curve, but Phase plant, I've never missed. I don't miss with phase plant. Phase plant is constantly just, I'm creating really cool sounds with phase plant all the time, which is really, really awesome. Try them all out. I highly recommend Serum. I highly recommend reverse engineering things. Remember to give Wavetable its fair shake with effects. That's what's really important. The sounds just don't normally have effects on them like all the Serum presets do. Distortion, OTT, all that stuff. But yes, a really great way to get custom, unique sounds, and you can make everything in this synth. The mod matrix is really fun and easy to use. A lot of expression can be added. Yes, Wavetable, dive in, have fun, get comfortable with Wavetable, and if you feel like making the jump, I would highly recommend downloading Serum and going from there with Serum. Serum is definitely an industry standard here. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this talk on sound design with Wavetable, and I hope to see you again soon. Peace.